Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So the origins of tonight's video go back, you could say arguably a few years, but realistically, maybe about 6 to 7 months when I started doing some research into today's topic. I've been back in the US after having lived in Sao Paulo for about 9 years. I've been back in the US about almost 2 years now. And of course, I've been following a lot of the discussions that are going on online. And it's been an intriguing, you could say conversation, debate, whatever. And where I want to go tonight is just an extension of what I'll say about my own just political views. When you believe in something for a while, for some time, I've said this over and over again. If you really believe in something, you have to be able to challenge what you believe and be able to reaffirm the reason why you believe what you believe. If you're not willing to make an honest assessment about that, then you're just you're going along for the ride. You're kind of deceiving yourself. So, for years, I followed along with a lot of the things that I was reading. It would it influenced my own political views. But as I said, as I'm always a person, I have to understand, both sides of an argument. I have to look at even, a lot of the things that I believe and say, okay, is this true? Is it not? Have I been deceived? Um, there was an old saying, I think it was Mark Twain who once said this. He says it's easier to deceive somebody than to convince them that they've been deceived or something to that degree. And I definitely find that to be true. When I go into conversations about things that I have discovered and things that I've researched, if it goes against the grain of what 90% of people believe, then, people react, people will ignore what you say. People don't, they don't give it a second thought. Some people might get angry. Some people might want to argue. They might want to debate. People will say, well, where are your sources? Well, how do you know you're not being deceived? And that's always a good question. I mean, the point is, oftentimes in this life, we have to analyze some of the evidence of what we believe, of what we've been told, and look at the outcomes and come to a rational conclusion about which side of the debate is right and which side is wrong. Okay. Sometimes it takes years, decades, centuries for people to see through something and, take the opposing viewpoint. Today's topic is just one of those particular subjects. And I definitely want to delve more into this because I'm just curious about what's going to become of, with leftist movements growing in Brazil by the year. I'm just wondering where Brazil is going to be in the next 5 or 10 years. Now, I remember all of the excitement when, Lula da Silva I think it was his third time running for election in Brazil in 2002. And after the first two, unsuccessful bids, he actually won in 2002, and he led as the president of Brazil from 2003 to 2010. His handpicked successor, Dilma Rousseff, the first female president of Brazil, took over. She won. She was a sitting president for one term, and then in the middle of her second term, there was a rising movement that basically, removed her from office on impeachment. They impeached the first female president. Okay. And, Brazil is extremely divided nowadays. It's funny because the same way that the US is divided, Brazil is divided almost equally in the same way. Like almost 50%, people want to be red and people want to be blue. You got left, right, conservative, liberal. The last election that brought, Lula was actually put in jail under corruption charges. A lot of people called him a thief. And, an extreme right-wing president took over, which was Jair Bolsonaro. And after his first term, Lula got back on the ticket. and he was able to run again, and he actually defeated Bolsonaro by like, I don't know, it was like a point and a half, 2 points, if that. So, Brazil has a lot of wounds, divided, between how the people think. People on the left side are pushing for more and more liberal politics, whereas people on the right side see the leftists as being, insane. You're taking the country in a bad direction. So, myself, I would have looked back and said, victory, Lula coming back for another third term. If this was 20 years ago, I'd have looked at this as a victory. But, seeing how far to the leftists want to go these days, I can't even really look at that as a complete victory. You know, I was still in Sao Paulo when the election that brought Joe Biden versus Donald Trump in the election. And, I was in a group with on this phone app where it was a bunch of us Americans who were living in Brazil, and we were having these conversations. The pandemic was going, the Black Lives Matter movement was going. And I just remember getting a lot of venom from people for expressing some of my views. I was telling people back then, I says, the idea for the left and most Black Americans was like anybody but Trump, just get him out of here, right? And my view at that time was, if you elect this Biden guy, you're going to see how far he's going to take the country. I was predicting, based on some of the things that I had read online, that anywhere from 10 to 15% of African American males would actually vote for Trump. That's actually a kind of a startling number, considering how African Americans have been voting for the Democratic Party since the FDR and the New Deal. But Black men have taken a position that they're just tired of where the left is taking them, right? I don't want to get too far off into that, because even though it's kind of related, because I kind of see that a lot of things that come out of the United States are just going to end up in Brazil by the same forces. People have to stop looking at political movements as something that just happens in one country or another, because when you look behind the scenes of a lot of these movements, you'll find the same fingerprints. I'm not going to get into that, but that's something you have to find on your own. I've seen enough evidence of this myself to be able to see through this. I've had to radically change how I look at a lot of things. I mean, whether we're talking about the left in general, where we're talking about, the Obama era, or anything else that people are arguing about these days. When Black Lives Matter jumped off some years ago, I called it a sham. That's because when I found out what really happened on the ground from the grassroots organizers of Black Lives Matter before it got taken over, and I says, well, this is a sham, because often a lot of African American movements are not what we think they are. They put Black faces on these people, but, the leadership behind these movements are often, other people. We'll just say other people. And people have yet to realize that. And as I say, these movements go global. So then once you discover, like, okay, by now everybody should know that Black Lives Matter is and was a sham. I called it back then. People were throwing verbal sticks and stones at me back in those days. This was, like 2-3 years ago, about 3 years ago. And I says, okay, I mean, people were convinced, like, no, this time everything's going to change. Black Lives Matter. This is going to change everything. I says, no, it's not. It's not going to change as much, just the same way we were deceived by the civil rights movement. If the civil rights movement is what it was supposed to be, then, things would be a lot different today. In some ways, things are different. But when you look at the Black community as a collective, what has really changed? I mean, we look 40, 50, and 60 years, and we see the disintegration of the Black family. That's a whole nother argument. But what I'm saying is, if I've seen this happen in the United States, and I see the signs of what happened in the United States, then I see the same thing happening in Brazil, I have to ask, okay, what's going to be the effect on a whole different country if they follow the same movements that have come out of the United States for a number of years? Okay. So that's where I'm coming from today with this piece. It's actually an article, I think, from 2017. And it's called, "Does Being a Feminist Make Relationships with Men More Difficult?" And I wanted to explore this because, for a number of years now, at least 2 to 3 years, and probably longer, depending on when you think this started, there's been pushback against the feminist movement in the United States. Men have voiced their concerns about where this is taking us. They voiced their concerns with how relationships with feminist women and modern women, how that affects relationships with men. And a lot of men have actually just, gone their own way. A lot of men, you call this movement the passport bros, a lot of them are looking for love overseas because they're convinced that, with the atmosphere and the environment of how American women see themselves in relationships, what they expect in relationships, they have, a lot of men have checked out. People have gone to Dominican Republic, they've gone to Brazil, they've gone to Thailand, Colombia. These men are going all over the world looking for a woman who they can click with better than the American version of women, right? So this is intriguing to me because, I've done a couple of stories on the whole passport bro thing. I've never considered myself, I've been going to Brazil for 23 years. So I've been going to Brazil for much longer than this whole idea of a passport bro, right? But I do understand what people are all about. But, you know, I'm just saying to people, and I've said this before, you should really understand about other countries, learn the language, learn the culture, learn the historical background so you can know, what to expect when you get there, particularly in a country like Brazil. Now, some months ago, I did a story about what's the brother's name? Austin Holloman. And I remember this had to have been back in about January or sometime. It's unbelievable. That's like 7 months ago now. He was basically run out of the country because, black women feminists in Brazil were looking at him as a sex tourist. And, they went online, they organized, and, he packed his bags and he had to leave because it just got a little bit too hot. And so, I said at the time, I'm like, well, I don't think Austin Holloman really knew what the environment was, particularly in larger cities in Brazil, I think had he known what the atmosphere is, in terms of the feminist movement in Brazil, I think he would have carried himself a little bit different. So, this piece that I'm doing today, it kind of it's not the first, it's not the second. I've probably done, maybe 5 to 10 videos now that's talking directly or indirectly about this topic. So what I'm saying is, my opinion, I've seen, okay, how long has feminism been going in the United States and what has been the result of the relationships with men, right? I'm saying a lot of the same things I'm seeing in Brazil, this whole thing of sexual liberation, sexual revolution, and women feeling free to just, sexualize themselves. It's almost getting absurd, some of the videos that I'm seeing. And then you have something similar to that going on in Brazil with this whole funk movement. And, for a while I was torn on that because, the funk movement, funk music, funk culture in Brazil, funky, what they call it, has been presented as, you guys want to shut this down because it comes from poor people, comes from black people. But then I started reading some of the lyrics and some of these songs, and I'm just like, how can you really stand behind some of this filth? Yeah, that's just how I was seeing it. Um, the ongoing sexualization of particularly black women and people seeing that as some type of empowerment. But up until what point do women continue to sexualize themselves and see this as something empowering? That's a whole nother discussion. It's actually an extension of the discussion that I want to have today. So let me get into this video for today and the topic for today, and then I'm going to go over some of the, some Google searches, maybe a couple of links that I've already, some of the material that is pertinent to the discussion today. So, does being a feminist make relationships with men more difficult? Now, this is an article out of Brazil. I translated it from Portuguese and I found it intriguing. So it's from the uol.com.br website. And again, I think it's from 2017. So let's just get directly into this. First, why even the topic of feminism? Well, number one is that according to some of the articles that I've done, let me try to find one of my articles here. Okay, so here, for example, it says here, black men and women are closer to feminism than white people in Brazil. Here we see that more than half of Brazilian women consider themselves feminist, and this is according to a study or a survey, okay? But there is a rising side we've seen it in the United States, and we're starting to see this trickle into Brazil. It's been around for a while. A number of women who they don't necessarily see feminism as something that's for in their best interest. So you see videos coming out of Brazil. Why feminism? Why doesn't feminism represent me? No woman needs feminism. Change my opinion. Why feminism doesn't represent me, and the same thing here. And you've got a bunch of articles on here where people are talking about this. This is one particular story that I want to cover one day in the future. And this is by a former Brazilian feminist. I think she lived in Eastern Europe for some time, but she calls the feminist movement the most intolerant movement she's ever known. Okay. So obviously people have the freedom to identify whatever political movement that they think represents them. And obviously you have the opportunity to say, this doesn't really fit me. So all I'm saying is, as we just saw, just Google searches for feminism in Brazil has now grown by 200% from 2017. I think it was from 2015 to 2017. You saw a Google search. The Portuguese word is actually feminismo. So it says it's grown 200% in those 2 years. Okay. What else do we have here? Okay, then you divulge into something that Black women have always argued that they weren't welcome in white women's feminist movements, and you find the same thing happening in Brazil. So then you get what's called feminismo negro, or Black feminism, right? This whole movement has exploded, particularly over the last decade. Okay. So then the question is, is this something positive for society, or is this something that's presented as something positive that's actually destructive to society? Where do you stand on that question? I'm going to talk a little bit more about this term, what they call female empowerment in Brazil. That becomes empoderamento feminino. You find that all over the internet, equal with feminism. Okay. But this is what I want to get at. It remains to be seen. A lot of people are already weighing in on how feminism is affecting Brazilian society. But what I've seen in the United States is what makes me want to open this discussion up and to see, okay, what's going to be the future from 5 years from now, when after 40 to 50 years of the feminist movement in the United States, articles are coming out now that says, why are women unhappier than men around the world? Let me see, what else do we have here? Women increasingly unhappy. The not so empowering lies women have been sold. So women more miserable than men. So, why is this? That's something that I can explore a little bit more. I want to stay on point with the article that I'm talking about today, but this is what I'm saying. This has been the result of the feminist movement in the United States. So I'm just asking the logical question. Now that feminism is growing in Brazil, what's going to be the outcome 5-10 years from now? Okay. As I talked about this in a previous video just this week. Divorce in Brazil has exploded. And understand, I'm not saying that this is directly because of feminism. There's a number of reasons why divorce has been exploding in Brazil for at least the last decade, and arguably for the last 30 years. It beat a record in 2021 with how many divorces were going down. In 2021, it increased from 2020 by 4%. Again, look at all of these stats. Marriages and divorces are up in Brazil. Divorces beat a record in the country. Divorces beat a record in Brazil and passed 77,000. So, whole lot of stuff, a lot of articles talking about the rise of divorce in Brazil as of late, particularly over, like I said, over the last decade. What else? Is there anything else I want to cover here? I think I'm going to just okay. Here's another point. I just talked about the Black Lives Matter movement. And as I said, when you come to look at these movements, you come to find out, if you're a person who looks at things internationally, these movements don't just stick in one country. So then, obviously there's racial discrimination and inequality in Brazil. So it shouldn't be surprising that they imported that movement and called it the exact translation, Vidas Negras Importam, which means Black Lives Matter that means, Black Lives Matter in Portuguese. There was here's another one, Black Lives Matter. Protests raised tone against racism in Brazil. This is rapper MEC then said why he wouldn't participate in Vidas Negras Importam. Vidas Negras Importam in Rio, protest against police violence. Then one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matters, or we'll say after the movement was taken over, this, what's her name? Tometi. She came to Brazil and she sat down. She was brought by a very popular Brazilian organization to discuss Black Lives Matter. And as I said, it kind of took off in Brazil as well. So let me get back into the original article because of I keep going back. This video is going to be super long. So first thing, to give this some context, Google searches for feminism or feminism in Brazil has grown over 200%. This is, again, it's courtesy of the UOL Brazilian website. And it says searches for feminism specifically have grown 200% in the last 2 years, putting the topic on the same level of interest as racism within the diversity agenda in the country. People want to know what it means. Google says empoderamento feminino, which means female empowerment. An analogous term was 4 times more searched in 2017 than in 2012. That says a lot. So what we see is that there's a rise in the search for the keyword feminismo and the keyword racismo. Both of these are agendas that's coming out of the left of the political spectrum. Okay. What else we have here? On the flip side, searches for information on machismo, macho, or sexism has grown 163% in these 2 years, while feminismo negro or black feminism is 65% more searched today than in 2016. This was something that I pointed out. As I said, there's plenty of articles that's talking about, black feminism in Brazil. Okay. So then I came across, as I said, what I'm noticing, and I had a friend tell me this some time ago, he had a strong presence, social networks in Brazil, but he slowly started shutting down his pages everywhere, whether it's Instagram, YouTube, his Apple, iTunes page. And he just said the environment is terrible in Brazil. It's like in the United States, you can at least have an open discussion, whereas in Brazil, people feel like they have to shut down their websites because men are not allowed to have a voice about how they feel about things. So he had to just kind of go shadow. He had to kind of disappear. So as I said, there's plenty of searches of people who are getting into feminism, but what is the other side saying? We can't really understand where a political movement is going unless we listen to both sides of the aisle. Okay. So I came across this Instagram profile by Joana Luisa, Brazilian woman. And this is what she said. The more the feminist agenda advances, the more women lose. Okay. She says, Gloria Steinem, again, a lot of Brazilians are familiar with, important figures out of the United States because the United States having such a large cultural influence around the world. A lot of people will be familiar with some of these activists, some leaders out of the United States. Americans are going to be famous all over the world. So this woman is talking about Gloria Steinem, and Gloria Steinem said that an emancipated woman works before marriage and after it. Great women leaders argue that women's freedom will only come with sexual liberation, which in their own words means having sex with as many people as they want and when they want. This is something that we hear coming out of Brazil all the time. The guys who are sitting back watching this, they say this is going rampant in Brazil, and it's going along with the funk culture that's that's taken over in the lower class and Black communities. Okay, a lot of people are upset with this. There's a whole website dedicated to women against feminism. It's a blog, and they talk about this all the time. It's like, okay, somebody like Anita is shaming how Brazilian women are represented around the world because of how she presents herself in her music and her videos. There's a lot of people who don't agree, even though Anita is one of the biggest stars coming out of Brazil today. A lot of people aren't buying it. They don't really like what her image says about Brazilian women in general. Continuing, it turns out that the view of the overwhelming majority of ordinary women has always been contrary to this. Women tend not to be able to disassociate sex from love and feeling, but feminism wants you to do that. And then this discourse advances, and more women are driven to do what goes against their nature and their will in the name of liberation that never comes. Feminism advances, and along with it, gender ideology where men compete with and gain from women. That's a whole that phrase says a lot when we consider the idea that, okay, do people not know what is the difference between a woman and a man today? And a lot of people are saying, okay, well, if women are gonna, and I've said this before, women, some movements that you see, it's gonna have to be the women who put their hand up and say, okay, that's enough. And you're seeing biological males moving into women's sports. I'm not even going to get into that discussion because I'm sure all of you are familiar with it. Okay, so she continues. The truth is one. Feminism is not a movement for women's freedom. It is a movement that wants to dictate what women can and cannot do, and that definitely is not freedom. Most women still see marriage as an important goal, while feminism insists on forcing them to want the opposite, and even convinces some with its well-constructed narrative. Most women also deeply regret casual sex or losing their virginity early, but feminism has always encouraged them to do so. Feminism wants to make you believe that having a successful career is more important than raising a family, but not for your freedom and not for your sake, but to perpetuate the agenda of the sexual revolution. She continues, feminism is destructive not only for women, but also for men, because it fights against everything that concerns human nature and everything that brings us happiness. This text is not about religion. It has to do with reality. And one of the comments that I saw was this woman right here says, feminism isn't just another form of communism. It is born in lies, grows in error, but dies in truth. I don't really need to add anything else to that. People who argue in favor of communism, I just asked, do you know the bloody history of communism, which I won't talk about today. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this picture here. Very famous picture of, a white woman. This is Gloria Steinem here. And this is Dorothy Hughes, a very famous picture. What I found interesting about this picture is that I came to find out that this woman is actually, I think she's the aunt of the actress Gabrielle Sidibe. You remember her from the movie Precious. I'm curious. I've read that in a couple of different places. I'm assuming that's true, right? So I didn't know that. But then look, as I said, Brazil copies so many things that comes out of the US. So then you have this photo here. I forget the name of the white woman here, but she's a famous Brazilian feminist. And this is Djamila Ribeiro. And for those of you who are not familiar with Djamila Ribeiro, she is a philosopher, a well-known feminist. She actually won a BET award. BET and BET Hip Hop Awards have been honoring more people outside of the United States who are Black. And I forget, I think it was 2020, 2019 that she won an award from BET. Every year, BET and BET Hip Hop Awards have been nominating not only just Brazilians, but a lot of different people from around the world, a lot of, reaching the African diaspora, as we call it. Okay. So you see the similarity there. Black woman, white woman, fist in the air. Okay. They repeated the same thing in Brazil. Okay. So the article I want to get into now is, does being a feminist make relationships with men more difficult? This is from the UOL site, and it's penned by Elena Berthel. Okay. So more and more women are considering themselves feminists. So much so that in the last 2 years, the search for the word has grown 200% on Google, which I just talked about. And what many of them have noticed is that from the moment equality between genders becomes an issue in their lives, a relationship with the opposite sex can get complicated. Now, this is funk singer MC Karo, or MC Karo, as they'll say in Portuguese. MC Karo, for example, when her marriage ended, she said that it's not possible to be a feminist, independent woman who's married. To the UOL website, she explained, my ex wasn't a complete chauvinist. He was chauvinist when it came to jealousy, to possession. Being a feminist is being independent, being free. I couldn't be free in this marriage. So this is what she said I'm quite sure if you listen to what she says, it's quite obvious that she's the one who filed for the divorce. Okay. And I forget what year this song came out, but MC Karo linked up with popular rapper Karo Konka, and they recorded a popular song called 100% Feminist. 100% feminista is how you would say that in Portuguese, right? Now, what I found intriguing about this is, how many years ago was this? Let me see if I can find this article right here. Karo Konka participated in Big Brother Brazil 21, the very popular reality show in Brazil. And a lot of women love Karo Konka, particularly Black women, because they see her as being, representative of the aspirations of a lot of Black women. They looked up to her, they idolized her, they bought her music. She became a very rich woman. If you remember, she was one of the women that opened up. Was it the Olympics or the World Cup? Both were hosted in Brazil. One in 2014. I think it was the Olympics in 2016. She opened the performances with this child rapper named MC Sophia. So she was introduced to a world stage. But when she appeared on Big Brother Brazil, she became one of the most hated people in the history of Big Brother Brazil. Her attitudes, the way she was speaking to one of the guys on the show. At that time, this is what the article was saying: from adored to hated, popular rapper becomes the scorn of Brazil after her arrogant behavior, abuse of colleagues on a top-rated reality show. Okay. So she had one of the highest get the F out of here votes in Big Brother Brazil's history at the time. Okay. So this is the woman who recorded the song 100% Feminist with MC Carroll. Okay. Just a little bit background. She has slowly been rebuilding her career, Karo Konka, but that's just something that happened a few years ago. I've just found it intriguing, that these two teamed up for this record. Okay. Psychologist Valeska Zanello has spent the last 13 years researching gender inequality within relationships and is about to release a book on the subject. In her research, she concludes that yes, it is more difficult for feminist women to be in relationships with men. Okay, this is Valeska Zanello. She says, in a sexist society, there is a hierarchical relationship full of inequalities. Feminism brings up certain aspects that become unacceptable for women, she explains. But despite this, she believes that these relationships can work. Quote, there are people who are open to deconstructing certain aspects. The question is not the hetero relationship, but who to relate to, who to be in a relationship with. Okay. For writer Ana Paula Lisboa, this woman here, the combination has worked out well. She says, since I identified with the movement and started declaring myself a feminist and continued to have relationships with men, it's difficult, but a possible balance, at least when I'm patient, she says. She thinks that making it clear that she is a feminist helps because men already know that there are certain things that are natural to them, but that she may not see as such. For example, she makes it clear that she won't be a priority, that he won't be a priority in her life, and also that he needs to not be sexist to stay in her life. Quote, of course, they show after a while that they are not deconstructed. And if you give them even the slightest gap, they grow and they really grow all they can. That's why feminist women often end up falling into abusive relationships for brief moments of neediness, carelessness, fragility, which men take advantage of, she says. But for her, it's worth it. For Tamidis Cantati, a psychologist with a degree or a doctorate in gender violence prevention, Anna's behavior is part of an important process. Identifying these behaviors and showing them to men, helping them identify and recognize them is a form of education. People are always changing, she argues. Okay, Anna Haddadi, a lawyer and creator of the feminist website Comum, which means common, believes that being a feminist and loving a man can be difficult. She says, we always suffer. We start to see things from other perspectives to problematize issues that previously passed unnoticed. Language, jokes, comments, attitudes at home linked to the division of tasks. To deal with these difficulties, she believes in the necessity of finding a partner who is available to listen and to deconstruct some things. Valeska Zanello points out that there is also no use getting involved with a man expecting him to change completely. What she says, it all depends on the openness that the man has, because to stop being macho implies losing privileges. For example, starting to participate in domestic activities is not just about teaching, but giving up privileges is bad, she says. This, of course, makes it more difficult to find a partner. You establish new relationship parameters in general and start getting involved only with men who are willing to give up privileges, including at home, agrees Anna. There are, however, women who believe that having relationships with men is difficult. Raquel, who preferred to have her last name preserved or hidden, ended up deciding that for her, it can't work. I had been questioning this for some time. Whenever I started a relationship, I would see those male behaviors that are seen as normal, and I would get the feeling of already knowing what was going to happen, she says. For her, men and women have different upbringings, not only in the family, but in society. And because of this, relationships already start with inequality. For example, the default is a woman's place without home with, wait, let me say that again. For example, the default is a woman's place without home with housework, of the man outside earning money. To change this, we need to discuss the rule, she explains, believing that this discussion of the rules is not always easy or possible. Valeska Zanello goes even further and says that the love mechanism is the main force of oppression that exists for Brazilian women. She says, in the way women learn to love, they need a man to feel legitimized as a woman, she says. Thus, achieving this without the male gaze could be liberating. But for Raquel, it was. For 6 years, she tried to get involved with guys, but she could never get beyond 1 or 2 months because they would give her little signs of machismo, like expecting from her certain behaviors considered more feminine. This year, she decided to start relationships with women. This is what she says. She says, it was a choice. Today, I am dating a woman and it is different. You still have the encounter of two people, but there are no preformed roles. They are more fluid. Okay. Now, what I found intriguing about that last piece there is that, there are certain factions that says, look, all people who are exploring their sexuality and they are homosexual, they're gay, they were born that way. I can't interpret exactly what this woman is saying because, people will look at it a different way, but she openly said she chose to date another woman after her frustration with men. And I've known a number of women who've done that. I've known American women who have done this, and I've known Brazilian women who have done this. Okay. So does this ignite the question of, okay, are people born this way or is this a choice? And I'm not going to pretend that I know the answer to that. I'm just saying, I'm just listening to what this woman said. She clearly said she made a choice. Then we get into this question of men, expecting certain behaviors that are considered more feminine. Where have we heard this before? So what I'm saying is, if you look at it, some of the same discussions that are coming out, the traditional roles, the ideas of feminist and modern women, and it's starting. We're already seeing some conflict that's going on here. Okay, so I'm curious to know what you all thought about this piece here. There's a few other. Let me see if there's a few other things I want to explore before I end this video. Okay, for example. A similar discussion is going on Brazil's YouTube. It says, why are men escaping or running away from women? The men are escaping from relationships. Same thing here. Let me see some of the men don't want relationships anymore. Okay, what else we see here? Escaping from relationships. They are giving up on dating because of this reason, and it goes on and on. So you see some of the same discussions that are going on in Brazil right now. Is there anything else I wanted to go over while I'm here? Okay, so check this out. You find a lot of these videos on YouTube coming from, the English speaking world, where you see women who, after years of following what feminism was preaching, they regretted being feminist and they end up leaving the movement. Woman says, I'm tired of being a feminist. Here says feminism created miserable women. A feminist regretting feminism. The sad truth of modern feminism. Okay. Let me see what else we have here. Meet the women against feminism. Okay, so you get a general idea of what what I wanted to get into. When women regret feminism, it ruined my life. I want a man to take care of me. So this is, what the conclusion that's coming out now. And we see this huge divide between men and women, men not wanting to get into serious relationships. So this is what's transpiring in the United States. So then my question is, as feminism continues to grow in Brazil, what is going to be the outcome? I'm never one to say that something is exactly happening in one place is going to happen the exact same in the other place, but we do already see signs that some people are already pushing back against the feminist narrative. Remains to be seen where Brazil is going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. But this is why I wanted to do this piece today, because I find it intriguing. What's going to continue there, uh, particularly with leftist movements. That's what I really wanted to get into here. So curious to know what your thoughts are on this particular video. I'm going to end it here. Definitely, I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment in the comment section. Consider subscribing to this channel if you found more than a few videos that you found entertaining or interesting. Share this video, like the video, comment on it. Click on the notification bell. If you want to see more videos from me, you'll be alerted when they first go up. And with that said, hope to hear from you, and I hope to see you come and check out my next video.